After our extraordinarily disappointing season last year in year number 5, we are starting year number 6, or I guess this is year number 7 at this point, with a brand new situation where we have Sean McVay now as our offensive coordinator and Brendan Washington, I should be able to say that because it's my own name, just spelt a little differently. Brendan Washington as our defensive coordinator. And, for me, I kind of looked at this offseason and I said, you know what? I'm gonna have to say it was the coordinators that were ultimately screwing our offense and defense up because last year we looked at it, Lance Klein, he just had such a poor year, just not doing what we need him to do. Again, he's that 97 overall. The numbers of a 97 overall do not reflect what we are currently seeing. 4,114 passing yards. That's very good, very much enjoyable. 22 passing touchdowns, not great at all. 6 interceptions, very happy with. But we need to see this number get at least back up into the 30s. And I guess just kind of looking at his career in the, I guess, 6 years that he's played, he's only managed to eclipse that 30-yard or 30 passing touchdown mark once in his career. But for how much we are paying him, and I will show you his contract right now, he needs to do a hell of a lot better since we're essentially paying him 67 to 70 plus $1 million a season. He needs to be better for sure, without a doubt, if he's going to warrant that type of contract. And frankly, I'm just hoping that Sean McVay is capable of doing that. But ultimately, welcome back everybody to the series, year number 7. And this is going to be a very, very interesting season to say the least. But then just taking a quick recap here at what happened last year. Lamar Jackson won the MVP. Romero Gallo, Lamar Jackson also won Offensive Player of the Year. Myles Garrett won Defensive Player of the Year. But our running back, Bryce Jefferson, won Offensive Rookie of the Year. That is absolutely huge for us. Gotta say, really, really happy with that pickup. But this is going to be an important first episode of the season as we are going to have a bunch of pretty important decisions to make. As you already saw, we already had 2 of them. But let's get into our first area of re-signing players. So for us, this particular offseason, of course, we are going to collect. Actually, I don't know if we are going to accept the 5th-year option on Stephen Norwood, because if we accept him this year and he continues to grow, we can sign him to a much longer-term deal at a shorter-term option, and we'll probably have him at a little bit more. And granted, try to get him a little bit more on the cheaper side of things. So definitely going to be not doing that, and so I guess we'll reject that. Rejecting the 5th-year option will result in the player having 1 more season remaining on their contract. They can be re-signed as normal next season. That is exactly what we are going to do. But then just taking a look at some of the players, we're going to be losing a handful of depth guys on our roster that aren't really doing too much. We only have the $9 million, so it is going to be one of those situations where it's going to be pretty tricky for us to ultimately re-sign any of these guys to any sort of situations. We're kind of in that weird stage of where we have a top end quarterback that we are going to have to ultimately, no, we've already signed him, so we're worrying about that. But yeah, it's going to be not really bring anyone else back. Just taking a look here at the top of the leaderboard, the Steelers for a 3rd year in a row have a top 2 pick, 3 years ago, I guess, the first out of those 3. They had the first last year, they had the second, and now this year again they have that first overall pick. The Pittsburgh Steelers, I remember they took a quarterback in last year's draft. My goodness, this team just seemingly cannot get anything right here at the moment. I guess they must just be hurting really, really badly. And but just continuing to look through here again, we have the 10th pick. I think we also have an additional one. We do. We have the 15th. Do we have any extra? I know I made a ton of trades to get a bunch of picks, so we just have the 2 there. And so it's saying that we're gonna select Justin Hightower. And if I'm looking at Hightower right now, I'm not really super enthused from what I'm seeing. Again, that B to D block shedding, so chances are it's best a C. I guess technically it's best going to be a B, but realistically it's C's not really showing me anything there. And then Tremaine Cummings, again, nothing really saying to me that he's overly amazing for me to potentially try to go after. There's a handful of decent looking offensive linemen here. William Kohler and Jaden Hewitt, but we're not really here to try to look through every single pick. Just trying to give you a quick look at the class. Looks to be a lot of offensive linemen in this draft class, though. So as you can see, we are currently not targeting anyone in free agency, and there's a few guys in free agency that I ultimately looked at and said I would like to sign, but just with $9 million in cap space, I just ultimately can't afford to really go after anyone that I want. And if we're gonna look for, there are some guys that I look at and go, oh, he's gonna be a depth guy, but I can realistically wait for that guy to come right after the draft and that be it. But there's a few interesting players that I think we should take a look at here going into the free agency portion, and number one being the best quarterback in the league, Patrick Mahomes, 34 years of age, and he is a free agent, and 18 teams are offering him a deal. Chase Young is also up there, AJ Cole, Frank Ragnow. The number one wide receiver in this one is Emmanuel Hawthorne, 25 years old, so he looks like an absolute beast. Matty Russell, this is a guy that actually wants to come to our team. I don't think I would have ever gone after him. 85 overall, 25 years old, not something that I would ever consider doing. Like, there's teams and players that would definitely like to come to us, but again, that main issue of paying some of these players. Cameron Dicker, he wants to come back to DC, but let's just take a look at where some of these players ultimately ended up signing. If any of them did, Mahomes did not. Frank Ragnow, he actually goes from the Lions to the Packers. And then DK Metcalf goes to the Cardinals, so he jumps ship, switching from a division rival. CJ Gardner-Johnson, he's now with the Panthers, but I think ultimately the biggest one here today is going to be, where is Patrick Mahomes going to sign? And he signs with the Green Bay Packers. I know they almost made it to the Super Bowl the year prior to, and they signed him on a one-year deal, 25.2 million dollars in salary and $30.9 million in bonus. So that is just absolutely massive for the Green Bay Packers, and needless to say, I hate everything about that move. So as we enter the draft, the Steelers, with their second first overall pick in 3 years and their third top 2 pick in 3 seasons. So who are they going to select first overall? They drafted a quarterback last year, and now they go with Brandon Laurie, the wide receiver out of Oklahoma. They decide to add their quarterback, a young, talented weapon. And for the first time in a long time that we've seen a wide receiver go first overall in the draft, in both real life and in the game. And let's see who the Denver Broncos select at pick number 2. They go with Chad Ellison, linebacker, or left outside linebacker out of Miami, likely getting their edge rusher of the future. But as per usual in the drafts, guys, I am going to sim to our pick, and we will take a look at that. So we have officially made a trade with the Jacksonville Jaguars to move back from pick number 10 to pick number 14. The one player that I thought was going to be there ultimately got taken a few spots ahead of me, so I just elected to trade down and try to manage our assets as best as we possibly could. So with the first pick in our particular draft, with pick number 14 for us, I decided to go with cornerback Steve Robertson. He is out of Oklahoma. I just saw the lack of turnovers that we had in last year's draft, and I said to myself, we need to get better. This guy looked pretty good on paper from what I was seeing from some of his combine results. Unfortunately, he does only have that normal dev trait, so we're just going to have to hope his overall is good. Otherwise, we might have just made a little bit of a tough pick. But moving over to pick number 15. So with pick number 15, Army Green is going to be our next guy, defensive tackle, a power rusher at 6'5", 300 pounds, out of Georgia, has that hidden dev trait. Looking at this guy, he looks really, really good. Able to get off the block, but play recognition, power moves, pursue, tackling are all at an A. It is awareness, fitness moves, and hit power all at a B. Block shedding would like to be a little bit more, in impact blocking would like to see a little bit better. But overall, really happy to get this guy, and he should be pretty good alongside what we currently already have. But that's going to be the last pick that I actually show here of the draft. But yeah, we will check back here when all the picks are done. So taking a look here at the actual draft class, as we typically do, just in general, but looks like Laurie was a 79 overall, so looks like that was a pretty half decent pick there by the Steelers. And then the next good pick came all the way at pick number 8, and that also happened to be a wide receiver, but it looks like Quan Allen at pick number 10, the guy that we traded to the Jags, was an 81 overall, and it appears that he's probably the best player in the draft. But James Morrow, a center that we ultimately took in the second round, he's a 79 overall and just a pretty good looking player for us. So speaking of our team, let's actually just take a look here at the actual class if it ever decides to load, and here it is. So looking at it, Steve Robertson, he is a 77, so that is very good for us to see. Granted, he does have that normal dev trait, so we were hoping that he was going to be a little bit higher overall. And then Green, he's a 74, but he has that hidden dev trait. James Stoudemire is what his name is. This could potentially be our tight end of the future. Hidden dev trait. Looks like he could be a pretty talented guy. Then Glenn Bolden. This guy was just too tough for me to not want to select and try to pass up on. He also has that hidden dev trait. He could potentially replace Tyree Wilson with that move right there, and obviously Morrow. So we're going to have to kind of figure out some of our offensive line situation. But Mitch McIntyre was another guy that I looked at and said, I got to take a look at. Manny Freeman, middle linebacker, was pretty good. Juan Alexander, he's a 70 overall. And then we just took a bunch of flyer picks here kind of later in the draft. Nothing really panned out pretty much past the 5th round or into the 5th round onwards. But hey, we got some guys at depth positions. And you know what? For the first portion of this draft, I'm actually really, really happy about it. And the fact that we got Morrow in the second round, this is going to be huge for us. So as we get into the regular season portion of the video, as per usual, we will be doing the 4 games to start the year as opposed to the halfway, and then we'll do in episode 2 of this particular season the last remaining games of the year and the playoffs. But as per usual, we will be simming all of the games, and every single time that we win, we will take a look at the game. But before we get there, let's actually take a look here at the lineup that we are running this particular season. And Morrow just happens to be a star as opposed to a superstar. A little bit unfortunate there, but still going to be a great center for us, hopefully moving forward. But Klein, it's going to need to be a very, very big year, without a doubt. Jefferson, who was the offensive rookie of the year last year, going to be so, so good. As you can see here, Stoudemire is in because Okonkwo is hurt. So depending on how he does over these next couple of games, when he comes back, as you can see there, he's still out for 3 more weeks. So if he can have some really good play over these first 3 weeks, he might just ultimately end up being the starter for the rest of the year in Okonkwo. He's on the final year of his deal anyways, so we aren't going to re-sign him unless he just has like an MVP level year for a tight end. But yeah, Luke Hunt, Jahan Dotson, and McCain, he is going to be there. One player that you're not seeing is Wicks. I ultimately ended up trading him away just because of what we saw him drop last year from, I think it was like an 82 to a 78. I ended up trading him for, I think it was like a 4th round pick. I believe it was to the Bengals. It was just one of those things where it was like, yeah, I'm going to move on from there. And Hunt also getting some playing time right there. Now taking a look here at our defense, Green and Norwood are going to be fairly good, but again, we're going to take a look at Wilson, and if he starts to slip, because he's also in the final year of his particular deal, so if he starts to not really perform, Bolden is going to quickly be put into that opportunity. And as we can see, McIntyre also happens to be a hidden dev trait guy as well, so that's going to be massive. We got our 2 young talented safeties, and then Emerson and Forbes are definitely going to have an eye out, because Robertson, he is also, granted, he does have that normal, but he's a 77, and we did draft him with our first pick, so he's going to be hot on those guys' heels. And again, Whitington, the captain of this defense. Taking a look at the special teams, nothing terribly special there. As you can see, Robertson, he's going to be playing a lot throughout the nickel. Moody, Norwood, and Wilson all on the D-line, and Whitington as our sub. But McCain, he's going to be our slot wide receiver. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this team performs and how they do. But the main guy that I'm really looking forward to seeing right there is Klein, just because obviously we just hope this offensive coordinator switch really helped change the direction of this team. So we will just have to wait and see. But hopefully I see you more often than not over these next 4 games, and we get to see a bunch of wins. This just happens to be our first win of the season in week number 2, and it goes against our rivals, the Dallas Cowboys. We have really had their number after the first, I think it was like 2.5 seasons. They just ultimately dominated us, but pretty much since then, we've had pretty good run of form against the Dallas Cowboys, ultimately beating them 21-14. Lance Klein just not having a great day whatsoever, but Justin Pearson, he had himself a decent looking day. Didn't get the win, but yeah, again, same thing that we're seeing from Klein. Jefferson, the 1 TD and a touchdown, and Blackburn also was able to get in there, and Connor McCain led the team in this particular game in the receiving yards, and Luke Hunt didn't catch a pass in the game. That is insane to see. Studmeyer had himself a decent little game there. Jahan Dotson, Blackburn, and Jefferson all caught a pass, but yeah, after week 1, Luke Hunt had himself a really, really good week to just not be targeted whatsoever. I don't know if he was hurt, but that is just not at all what you want to see. And Zerma gave up a sack there, but Whitington, oh my goodness, having himself just a big boy day, having a half of a sack and an interception. And then the half sack was also with Gordon Goodrich. So that is our first win on the year. Getting our second win in a row this season, week number 3, we were able to beat the New York Giants by a pretty hefty score of 31-13, absolutely dominating them throughout this game. Lance Klein having the 2 passing touchdowns, low amount of yards, so again, we know he's a slow starter, and this has been one of those seasons where we're hoping for more from him, but definitely getting more than just the 1 passing touchdown is at least better to see. But Harry Morgan not having himself a particularly good day, the 2 interceptions and getting sacked by our team, but Jefferson having himself a nice little day, and Blackburn also getting into the end zone. That's good to see. And Connor McCain from the slot doing pretty well, and finally getting Luke Hunt back into the game. I know we have Sean McVay as our offensive coordinator, so he should be getting Luke Hunt into the game, unlike the week prior to. No sacks given up by our defense, and Emerson having himself a nice little day, getting the 9 tackles, and he also got an interception. But for the sacks, Leslie Moody, the lone person to get it, and who was our interceptions getter? Emmanuel Forbes and Emerson. So hey, our defense is finally getting interceptions. I think that's our third. We have 3 on the year so far, which I think either equals to or is very close to the same amount that we had last year. So we're on a 1 per game basis here at the moment. I'm just happy that we're finally getting some sacks and some interceptions though. So, as we talked about at the beginning of this episode when we declined Stephen Norwood's option, we ended up finally getting him to re-sign. This was the first week of negotiations, and we signed him to a 5-year deal to something where I think he's ultimately going to be cheaper for us down the road. Only an 82 overall, but definitely one of those guys that we want to try to keep around long term. Now, we were also able to, in week number 4, get Jeffrey Whittington, our star middle linebacker, the leader of our defense, signed up to a 4-year contract. This is exactly what you need to do with these young, talented players, is lock them up, making sure that they cannot go anywhere, and super happy to keep this guy on this roster. So after 4 games this season, we were only able to go 2-2. So this is a much better start to the season than we saw in our last 2 seasons, where we weren't able to make the playoffs. And last year was without a doubt the worst team our team had experienced over that time. But yeah, you know what? I'm not going to complain with 2-2. Not super happy with this loss. I took a look at the stats as I do for all of the games, but yeah, it's not pretty. But let's take a look at the official stats throughout the season for all of our players as we can take away and move on over there. So taking a look at Lance Klein, so far 924 passing yards, the 4 passing touchdowns, and the 1 interception. He is at a 74% completion, and he has been sacked 4 times. Again, he's kind of playing at that 1 passing touchdown per game pace, and to me, that is just simply not good enough. You can't have 17 passing touchdowns and be paid the amount that you are being paid for me to ultimately want to keep him on this team. And if this trend continues into next episode, I guarantee you he will be benched. So he needs to seriously pick his play up. And like, I think if we looked at it last year, he had 5 passing touchdowns to like 5 interceptions. So he's even worse in terms of the passing touchdowns. This is just embarrassing for him, and I don't even know what to think. It's just a joke. Taking a look at Jefferson, he's having himself a pretty good year so far on the ground. 278, the 4 rushing TDs. Really happy with that. And then McCain and Hunt, they're kind of fighting for that top spot. Both have 20 receptions there, but McCain has the lone touchdown receptions through the air. Actually, taking a look here at our young tight end and Strodermere, 9 catches, 107 yards. Okonkwo got in for one of those games, 31. I think we're going to continue to try to test these two and just kind of go a little bit of back and forth and kind of see how it goes. But yeah, so interesting situation there. The sacks in Zerma and LeBlanc. So in Zerma, he's not necessarily a great tackle, but it is what it is. Whittington leading the team with Okereke coming in second, and then Winslow also doing that. But taking a look at our sacks, Leslie Moody is at 2. Gordon Goodrich from the outside linebacker spot with 1.5, and then Whittington. I did basically boot Tyree Wilson out of that spot in favor of Golden for the last game. So Golden has pretty much 1 game of starting action, so I want to see more sacks there. But Whittington, Emerson, and Forbes all with interceptions, so we actually saw some interceptions this year. No defensive touchdowns. Taking a look at the kicking game, extra points are perfect, but 3 for 5 for Duggan. 60%. Definitely want to see that a little bit better for sure. But ultimately, that's going to do it here in this episode, guys. Thank you all very much for hanging out. Make sure to come back soon for episode 2 as we take on the Eagles in this first game. And yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this episode, and make sure to come back, but make sure to like and subscribe and check back for more gaming content.